Hi, this is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. Wow, it's been a long time, but we have this COVID hopefully under control, and I welcome you all back to the program. We have lots of things to talk about today, and we'll have many more programs to engage other artists in the arts and culture of our beautiful community. So let's start. I have with me a very famous writer, someone who I've known for years and years and years, and we've shared many a book event together, Judy Ricketts White. Thank you for coming, Judy.
Hi, Harriet. It's so wonderful to be back here and, to have things opening up again now that, things are getting hopefully a little bit more normalized.
Yes, exactly. But we, as writers, have taken the opportunity to do a bunch of things together and to foster our writing skills. During this COVID, I actually wrote 2 novels. So yeah, it's been a bit of a craziness, but it's actually been completely productive for me.
That's great.
So tell us about some of your stuff. You've been an author published author for a number of years.
I have. I published my first book, Slater, The Journey, in 2015. So I've been writing for a while and publishing for a while, which is wonderful. I've really enjoyed this extension of my creative life.
Tell us about the book.
Well, Slater, The Journey is about a girl, her horses, family, and friends. I am a horse owner, a horse lover. I've been studying horses for a number of years, and I have horses that I keep at my home. And so what I've tried to do is take good, solid horse handling principles, and I belong to a horse study group, and interweave those into the stories. These are fictional books, but I've tried to put some real life horse handling information into the stories to make them more realistic, and to give a little bit of informational takeaway, although they're just supposed to be fun fictional adventures, and they're geared for readers about ages 8 and up. So preteens and teens, but I found that adults really love the books as well. So
people ask me as a writer, how did you get started?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I'm a graphic designer, web designer, and illustrator, and so I've always wanted to do an illustrated children's book. So I did one illustration, and then I decided, well, I really should start writing something. And so I sat down and started writing, and about 130 pages later, I realized it wasn't going to be an illustrated children's book. And it turned into more of a book a chapter book for preteens and teens. So, but I love it. I love that it just evolved however it was supposed to evolve. I love that about the stories. So the first book, Slater, The Journey, is about basically a journey. It's about our main character, Bailey Matthews. Her family lives on the edge of the wilderness, somewhere out west near where there are wild horses. And she actually studies a herd of wild horses that comes through near the family ranch. And her mom is a horse trainer, so she works with her mom, training horses and learning about horses, and the family farms the land. They have sheep, and they also grow a lot of the food that they need for their own family. So they're great stories about family values, family relationships, working as a team. So there's just wonderful wonderful feeling about the books, and great role models for young preteens and teens growing up. And in the first book, her grandfather gets injured during a really intense storm. Her parents are away, her other family members are away at the time, and so Bailey has to step up and take a dangerous journey through the backcountry to get help for her grandfather who's injured. So it's an exciting novel and a fun novel. There's all kinds of twists and turns and sort of little side stories that happen. There's fun with her friends during the book. So a lot of teenage type things going on. So it's just a fun read, and especially fun for horse-loving kids, but for anyone, really. They're just good stories. I kind of compare them to Disney stories in that they're fun for the whole family.
Right. And then you decided there was more to tell, and then you created a second novel based on the first novel.
Exactly. The story continues. Some of the characters are the same, and there's some new characters that happen in the second book, which is Slater Mountain, the Legend. And in the Slater Mountain books, the horses are as much the characters as the people are. So you get to know the horses because they're very unique. All horses are unique individuals, just like people are unique individuals. So in the second book, Bailey Matthews goes on a trail ride with her friend Noah, and they, through dangerous and strange circumstances, they end up finding themselves trapped in a place that time seems to have forgotten. And they have to figure out a way, how to survive, and if they can get out and get home or get help or whatever. So it's sort of an exciting adventure, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of just life awareness and sort of like light bulb moments that happen. They're just fun fictional adventure and lots of fun horse adventures. So I'm really enjoying them.
And then I guess during COVID, or was it before COVID, you then got this idea of taking your mother's poetry. Your mother was a known poet, and compiling it into an anthology of her poetry, which is something that you discussed with her while she was still alive.
Right. My mom was a reporter, a journalist, and an English teacher during her career, and she always wrote poetry. She started writing poetry in her teens, and she wrote poetry her whole life. And so she got some of the poems published during her lifetime, and it was a dream of hers to always get her poetry manuscript published. She and I worked on it at some different times during her life, but we never quite got it to the point to submit to publishers. So then after she passed away, and then some years later, I wrote my 2 books and self-published them. I realized I really should get my mom's poetry manuscript published. And so I started working on it with the help of some of my siblings as far as going through some of the poetry and collecting all of the poems for the book. And then also with family photos and photos that my mom had taken. And so I worked on getting the whole book put together and proofread and everything and designed. And I managed to publish it right as the COVID shutdown happened. Mm-hmm. So that was March of 2020. I was able to get that published. And it was a wonderful feeling for many reasons, because I wanted to honor her, first of all, and I wanted to be able to share her work with the world because her poetry is fantastic, and also to protect her work. So it's wonderful to have it and to be able to share it with people. And her poetry is written, she wrote on a wide variety of subjects, but the major themes through her book, through her poetry and through the poetry book, are love, loss, and the indomitable human spirit.
Lovely, just
Yeah.
inspiring, especially given the times that we're living in.
Yes, yes.
So I, as a writer, took this COVID business, which we put us in isolation, but as an author, writing is oftentimes a solitary event. It's certainly novel writing. You're there with yourself, and you have your whole mind. You're thinking about the scenes and the characters. And I found that the COVID experience was one that projected me into my past. And so when I started to sit down to write my new novel, which is Rockaway Riptides, which is actually published under my full name, Harriet Goodman Grayson, I started to think back to when I was a kid in high school on the cusp of adulthood. And during that senior year, lots of things happened that were monumental. And I grew up in the 1960s, so the events of the 1960s were actually sort of edged in my mind. One was, of course, the assassination of John Kennedy, our beloved president, and such a young and handsome man with a beautiful wife and two lovely children, gunned down just as his career was finally coming true. And I found that that was the moment, I can tell you right now, the exact moment I heard that news, where I was, what I was doing, and it was part of my high school experience. So I delve into that as part of the backdrop for the Rockaway Riptides. And the second thing was being a high school student, on the cusp of doing things, because I would look in the paper before I was writing this, and I'd see all these stories about these poor kids that graduate high school during the COVID, and they're just kind of crushed. It's like they don't know whether they have a future or not. And I thought back into to my years, and when I write, I'm writing about also the Vietnam War, which was just flaring up. And one of the most important parts of that, my book, Rockaway Riptides, is the fact that one of my classmates, and this is actually quite true, he graduated a year before us, and he came back during our senior year in a body bag from Vietnam. And that, I think, changed my life as well in ways that, again, I can remember absolutely precisely just moments of where this stuff was important. And I bring that into the novel. So I have this story that reflects back, which is not a memoir in a sense because it is fictionalized, but it brings into all the angst that young people have, which I think we have even to this day during this time, and all of the conflict that we had as a society. In the 1960s, the older generation thought that the world, the United States, was just coming apart. I mean, we had all these factions for the war, against the war, for racial equality, against racial equality, Jim Crow laws. I mean, all of that was part of the 1960s, and we thought, oh my God, are we ever gonna be whole again? And here we are back in the 21st century, and we're thinking about similar kinds of things in the current environment. And I think back, you know what? This is not the first time we've gone through conflict, and it won't be the last time, and we'll outgrow this as we have the other incidents. You can remember these things, but they don't have to inhibit the country from moving forward. So I thought about that, and that's really the real main reason why I wrote Rockaway Riptides. And then during the COVID, we have lots and lots of time. So what are we going to do? So as writers, we think back, oh, what else? And I thought back to the 1920s and 30s when I was not alive, but the stories my mother told me about her father and her grandfather running booze for the gangster, I'm forgetting his name, Dutch Schultz. And that's a story that I'm working on with Judy, who is my editor and designer. And we're working on The Accidental Gangster, Dutch Schultz and me. Again, a look back. I was not around, but my mother's stories were fascinating. And so it is based on true events about how my grandfather, the fisherman, became a gangster working for Dutch Schultz, delivering booze around the country. So that's part of my story. And I thought I would put it on. It was just the perfect time given the craziness in this country. So I go back to Judy in terms of what's now on the horizon for you as a writer.
Well, I'm currently working on the third book in the Slater Mountain book series. I was able to write about half, get it about half written during COVID, so I'm continuing to work on that, and it's an additional adventure, and a fun and learning adventure, so I'm looking forward to finishing that up and getting that published. So that's on the horizon, and I've actually I also have a couple of children's illustrated books in the works. They're not anywhere near being finished yet, but I've been working on some illustrated children's books as well. And I wanted to mention in my mom's poetry book, her name is Elizabeth M. Ricketts, my mom's name. In that book, there is also an epic ballad poem about the assassination of JFK. So for history buffs, they would be interested in that. It's a wonderful poem, depicting the actual event of his assassination. And so that's a real plus.
And there's a story that's even behind that about how you sent that poem to Robert Kennedy, his brother.
My mom sent the poem.
Oh.
She sent a copy of the poem after she wrote it, because she wrote it soon after the assassination. And she sent a copy of that poem to then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, who wrote my mom a thank you note, a signed thank you note, which I have included in the book. So there's that as well. So history buffs would be interested in that. And then to my mom's credit, the title comes from a poem in the book, Count Me Never Lost. And that poem was actually published in the New York Times during the 60s, I believe. So that's a real credit to her. And she was also among the nominees. She didn't make it, she wasn't chosen, but she was among the nominees for the post of the Poet Laureate for the state of Florida at one point. But, like I said, someone else was actually chosen for the post. Right. But she was honored just to be nominated. So,
yes.
So she really has some accolades to her name. So.
What gets you interested in young people and children versus, like, I would never think about writing a children's book. It's just not in my purview to think that way.
I'm always drawn to children and young people because of their uninhibited creativity and play and inspiration. They're just always such a joy to be around, that writing in that state of mind, because when you write for children, young children, doing an illustrated book or preteens and teens, I kind of have to remember what it's like being them, to write for them. So it's very it's just inspiring and fun and joyful and rejuvenating to do that. That's the way I feel. So I just enjoy that.
Are these children's books also going to have a horse theme?
One does, and some may not. So one is horse themed, and then another one that I'm working on is not horse themed. So there'll be a variety of subjects.
Did you grow up with horses?
I didn't, but I grew up in a sort of a rural area, and friends, neighbors had, one neighbor that was a close friend of mine had pigs and goats and sheep and ducks and all kinds of animals, and I would go up and help her with her chores so that we could go play faster because she had a lot of chores. And my mom raised dogs, bred dogs and raised them, but we didn't have other animals at that point. But there were 2 teenage girls in my neighborhood who had horses, and they used to ride their horses on the road in front of my house. And I always wanted a horse because I just thought that was so fun to be riding their horses and enjoying being together with their horses and riding around the neighborhood and on trails and stuff. So I always wanted to have a horse, but it never quite worked out for me until I was an adult to be able to have a place that I could have a horse and everything. So I decided at one point that it was now or never. So that at that point I decided to go ahead and get a horse and learn, and I'm really glad I did, because it's just been a lot of fun and a learning experience. And with horses, as in any discipline, whether it's, whether you're playing an instrument or you're taking part in sports or whatever, whenever you're following a discipline, you always learn through doing that discipline and learning. The life lessons are transferable to your own life and to your relationships. Things that happen with, working with horses, or might happen if you're in sports, working with teammates, or musicians working with other musicians. All those skills and relationship lessons are all transferable to life. So it's just a wonderful thing for anyone, regardless of your age. So it's particularly wonderful for children to be able to be in these disciplines and learn and experience and grow for their life, for their future life. So.
You watched the Equestrian Olympics?
I've watched some of it. Yeah, I've been able to watch some of it, and I've watched some of the other events as well. But yeah, lots of fun, and again, it's that everything is all rolled into these competitions. You're not only is it your skill and your performance under pressure, but then your relationships with your teammates and all of that.
And of course, with the horses, since they do the majority of the work on these equestrian events.
Well, people think a lot of people think that riding horses or working with horses isn't really a sport. That the person isn't doing that much, but go ride for a couple of hours and tell me afterwards that you don't feel all of that, all of how it affects your muscles and everything. It is a sport, and you have to be in shape as well as having your horse in shape. And then on top of that, you're communicating with another species, not another person, but another species. So it really is a team sport. You and your horse are a team, as well as the fact that you're an athlete, your horse is an athlete, and then the relationships with your other teammates as well.
I think one of the other interesting things, again, from not being a rider, never owning horses, is that the riders are often well beyond the age that you would have any other kind of athlete. There was a man, I think he literally was in his 50s, who was going for a medal in this equestrian event.
And that's a wonderful thing about equestrian sports, is that you can, and it takes a lot of years to develop the relationship, with your horse and your own skills, so that people are competing well into middle age and beyond in equestrian sports, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and the horses are actually are relatively old. I mean, I think they're old.
They
15, 19 years old. There's no two or 3 year olds.
No, because again, it takes a lot of time, years, for horses to develop the muscle and the knowledge and the communication to be able to perform these intricate moves. And strenuous moves.
And to remember them.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch it, and I'm just, not only the jumpers, but just some of the other events where they walk, but they walk in a very specialized way, and I don't think that they really have to memorize it, because the rider can't be constantly reteaching them every time.
No, they're not teaching them, but that once you teach a horse, they know it, but then the rider cues them when to do certain things. So that's the communication part of the communication, other than the learning of it, is the timing of the cues, so that your timing and with your own body and with your horse's body, match, and your timing is correct with, say, if it's a musical, performance or event, everything has to match. Or if you're jumping, the timing has to be perfect, so that when you go over the jump and everybody lands on the other side safely,
right,
and your horse isn't hitting the jump with its foot or whatever. There's so much in the communication and the cues, as well as practice. But it's building all those muscles correctly to be able to perform the maneuvers that's so important in the equestrian sports. You can't really start a horse. A lot of people, for race horses, they actually start horses, in my opinion, and many others' opinions, too young, because the joints aren't actually fused. Most horses, the joints aren't fused until they reach like the age of 3 or 4. And sometimes, so a lot of times horses are being started too young, and then they end up with physical problems later in their career and their life. So that's one of the reasons why in equestrian sports the horses are older, because they fortunately have waited till they're physically mature enough to be able to handle the strenuous work that they have to do. So that's a factor as well.
I saw that in this ongoing event that a rider actually fell off the horse, and so.
I missed that one.
Yeah, so you can see that even in the best of circumstances, it potentially is a dangerous thing that.
Things happen, miscommunications happen, your timing is off. So it's all very crucial and critical, because yes, it's a dangerous sport. Any horse sport is a dangerous sport.
Yeah, and obviously these are the best of the best. So it was actually surprising. I don't think he was seriously injured, but he was injured. He did fall off the horse.
Yeah.
And then you do see how the horses, like their hoofs, could actually not completely get over the
jump or the hurdle. Yeah.
Yes, and there, so there's a very complicated, I think, in my mind, points and penalties and all of that stuff about how they even just touch it a little bit and it's minus something. So it's an incredible precision required of both certainly the horse, and the person who's guiding the horse is of course the rider.
Right.
Who also, I would assume that the people we're talking about having used the riders are familiar with these horses. They've had them for years and years, 5, 6 years. If they've been in more than one Olympics, it could have been the same horse that they used 5 years ago or 9 years ago.
Many times, but not always. Sometimes it is a newer match of horse and rider. But usually in Olympics, they've been together for a number of years in order to get to that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are aspiring equestrians, you better start soon. Get yourself a horse. And I assume, I don't know, that these particular kinds of horses are special in terms of being jumpers versus something you might ride with.
There are many different breeds of horses, and horses have been bred through the years for specific jobs, to be especially good at specific jobs. There are horses that are bred to be jumpers. There are horses that are bred to be dressage horses. And there are horses that are bred to be ranch work horses. There are horses that are bred for every specific job imaginable. And the toughest ones, I think, are eventing horses, because they have to do multiple tasks. In eventing, you have to do cross country, you have to do stadium jumping, and you have to do dressage. The eventing is like a three specialty event. So the horse has to be good at all of those, which is, it's much more difficult to have horses that are good at multiple jobs than a horse that's good at one specific type of job.
Yes, it's very interesting. I guess it becomes much more complicated than just raising dogs to do certain things. I mean, it's.
I think it's equally, except that you don't ride a dog.
Right, exactly.
But some dogs are bred like to pull sleds, like sled dogs and things like that. So it's similar, very similar, that dogs are bred for specific jobs. But that doesn't mean they're not good at other things. They are. But
as a non-rider who occasionally has ridden horses, I find that the most enjoyable thing of all is that, of course, when you're on top of a horse, you feel like you're on top of the world because you are so much higher off the ground than you are by walking. And even being in a car driven, the seat in the car is lower than being on top of a horse. And I found that is exhilarating. It makes you feel like, oh my God, I'm the queen of the mountain.
It is a wonderful feeling to be on a horse. And to me, it also feels like such an honor that, a prey animal, I mean, because we're predators, dogs are predators, but horses are prey animals, that they have a lot of fear because predators can attack them, in the wild or whatever. But it's a great honor that a prey animal would actually allow a predator to ride on them and direct them. So, I mean, I just feel that that's an amazing honor and an experience. And I also, not to sound too woo-woo, but but I feel like horses have a huge energy field. They're just so much larger than we are. So they have a really large energy field, and that is a very wonderful feeling to be around them. I think that's one of the reasons why horses are used in therapy, horse-assisted, equine-assisted therapy, because the large energy field that horses have they found it has a very healing effect on people. So that's another specific job that horses do and are used for, and it takes certain types of horses that are good at that. I mean, different breeds, but it's more like an individual personality horse type that is good at doing equine-assisted therapy. They have to be very kind and willing and understanding, but their horses are being used, yes, for a physical purpose, but also for this energetic quality that they have that actually helps people. So.
I know in Connecticut there's a number of organizations that help veterans and help children with this whole idea of putting even the soldiers who've had just tough times in a war situation, to have them work with horses. So yeah, you absolutely have captured some of the essence of what makes them valuable for us to heal.
Yeah. I mean, so now, it used to be for centuries, that horses were used for jobs, work, travel, transporting goods, war, whatever. But now a lot of what their jobs are recreational. People have them and use them for trail riding and enjoyment. So they're actually, used more for recreation now than actual work jobs, although they're still used, especially like on ranches and for different purposes. But they're really not used in war any longer, or very rarely to pull vehicles. It's more of a vacation type situation where horses and carriages are used to transport people, and it's more of a pleasure thing. So, you know, they're really being used by greater numbers for recreation than for anything else. So,
So we as authors are going to be involved in a number of events as the fall hopefully opens up, and even if we have to wear a mask indoors, we're going to be able to see people and do things. So I have, after a long process of delay, we're going to open up Literary Salon again.
Yay.
So, and we have to thank Colin Bennett, the owner of the Malted Barley in downtown Westerly. We're going to open up on August 23rd at 7 o'clock at night, upstairs in this beautiful party room. And you can join us. We'd love to have people come. If you are a writer, a playwright, a poet, we encourage you to come and enjoy what we're doing, and also to, if you want, to read your own work. It's also an opportunity to see other local authors, and we can autograph books and just have a lot of fun. The other thing that's coming up, which is long awaited since of the COVID business, is of course the Big E. It's back. We hope to have the gates open in September. And Judy and I will be sharing a booth together at the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association in the Connecticut building. And that'll be in September, and there'll be some information about that. So we want people to come on back to the Big E. It's just, we missed it a lot. And now hopefully it'll be back, maybe as strong as ever, as people are eager to get out of their homes. And of course, it's an open environment. Most of the things you see there are things that you are not indoors. So there's lots of opportunities. So those are the things that are happening for people in the neighborhood, in the community, to get involved in and come and see, and to back up the Big E again, to get some people out there. So this has been fun, Judy, right?
Yes.
Yes, and so we're happy to have you here. We share lots of events together, and we'll continue to do so.
Yeah. And in fact, we're going to be also at Equine Affair in November.
Yes.
Hopefully coming up.
Yes, at the Big E exhibition.
Eastern States exhibition. The same location as the Big E.
Same location. I think of it as just, the Big E, but yes,
but
exactly.
It's the Equine Affair.
Equine Affair.
And that's November 12th and 13th.
So it's into the holiday buying activity. So think about a great place to buy presents for people who have horses, want to have horses, and for us who are writers who are always looking for an audience.
Right, exactly.
So I want to thank you for coming on board and for sharing with us your wonderful writing and also this fabulous information about horses.
Yes,
which
lots of
attract
fun.
a lot of attention for people, and go on the TV and watch the equestrian events. People can relate to that even if they've never ridden a horse.
Right, exactly.
So it's wonderful to see you, and I want to thank my audience. I hope you'll come back again and again. Hopefully we will be in the business of producing lots more shows as some of the COVID business starts to ebb lower and lower, and we can become more as we have been. So this is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. I hope you'll join me again, and I thank you very much for visiting.